Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by TomTom. Today, we have an exciting session ahead. We are going to be talking about improving ROI in commercial auto insurance with the help of contextual location data. I'm Vinod. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm going to be introducing the expert panel that we have today. Over to you, Peter, to kick us off.
Sure. Thank you, Vinod. So I am Peter Thompson. I lead our insurance business for TomTom here in North America. Been with the company for a little over a year and excited to dive in with our partner, Draivn.
Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Vinod. Thanks, Peter. And thanks for having me. I'm Alex. I'm one of the original co-founders of Draivn. My background, has very little to do with insurance and full transparency. I'm coming from the other side of the equation, from transportation supply chain. Was always passionate about the potential of leads data, was always looking for better ways to utilize this information. And that's how I found myself in insurance a couple of years ago.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for sharing that story. Lastly, I'm Vinod. I lead the product marketing for insurance at TomTom. Really excited to be hosting both of you on this session today. So, what do we have for today? Today, we are going to be specifically talking about how location tech can improve the loss ratios in commercial auto. As you know, commercial auto is brutally hard. Out of the top 20 commercial auto providers in the US, 14 of them make losses today. And that's because they don't make use of enough location context in the whole risk assessments. Today, we have an expert panel with us, Peter and Alex, who are going to walk us through how to change this. Over to you, Peter, to kick us off.
Great. Thank you, Vinod. So hopefully everybody's familiar with who TomTom is, but as a quick background, TomTom's been around for a little over 30 years. We started as a pioneer in satellite navigation. Today, we are a B2B company primarily focused on providing data to both auto and enterprise organizations with a specific focus on being location experts. So geospatial information, traffic data, et cetera. So those are the pieces that we are going to explore as we look at how location data helps auto insurance pricing. So just for a quick background, what we find is poor quality is the biggest concern for insurtechs across the board. And we feel that TomTom's location data can really help elevate that data quality gap and help underwriters really improve loss ratios by incorporating really precise location data and provide better context to what is being seen actually in the environment across the insurance space. So today, TomTom actually, our data supports risk models that result in a direct $10 billion worth of premiums written. So we've been involved in this space for quite some time. And what makes us stand out is primarily in the auto space is the traffic data that we're able to provide. So today, TomTom is collecting probe data, so actual vehicles on the road from over 600 million connected devices today. And that allows us to get 15-minute updates on our traffic data. What this means is that we have both live traffic data and historic traffic data dating back to 2016. And again, it's all about providing context to the insurance space. So in addition to our traffic data, we still have a very core geospatial offering. So our latest product, TomTom Orbis, came out of our relationship with the Overture Maps Foundation. So Overture Maps is an open consortium that was started by TomTom, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. So what TomTom is doing is we're taking Overture data that is generated by these companies, plus an additional 30 companies that contribute to this open source. And then we stack TomTom proprietary data. So that's going to be things like information on the road network, so the speeds of road segments, information on the curvature of the roadway, the gradient of the road, historic speed information of the roadway. So we're taking that information with OpenStreetMap, which is another great open source mapping platform. And we're combining all of this and providing a really rich map that's updated on a weekly basis. And again, it's all about providing context to both insurance industries and other industries. So for TomTom, we see three primary use cases that leverage TomTom data in the insurance space. And again, this is a focus on auto insurance. So the three primary use cases are around territory risk pricing, usage-based insurance, which is of course very critical for Draivn, and that's why they're here to speak with us, and then fraud detection and claims validation. Obviously, fraud detection and claims are a huge cost to insurance carriers, and we are confident that TomTom's data can help alleviate that cost. So again, use case number one is incorporating our core geospatial offering. So that Orbis data, bringing that in with traffic volumes, traffic stats, speed limits, and speed profiles, all to paint a picture of what the environment looks like. So for instance, if you build a territory based on zip codes, maybe zip code 123 has very high traffic volumes, has a really dense road network with high curvatures, and zip code number 324 is a much lower traffic volume. The speeds tend to be a little bit lower. So maybe we score that second zip code a little bit lower than the first zip code. I think it's very critical to point out, though, at the end of the day, TomTom is a data provider. So what we're doing is we're actually contributing our data to building these risk scores. TomTom is not actually building the risk scores. We're simply supporting with our core geospatial offering, our traffic offering, to help build these scores. Use case number two focuses on usage-based insurance. So those are the telematics devices that policyholders are using as they do their daily driving. What we find is that the UBI programs do a great job of collecting very, very granular data on individual drivers. But what it doesn't do a very good job of is providing context to what is actually being seen on the roadway. A great example is harsh braking events. So what we see is harsh braking events are all scored the exact same when you don't have context, right? So let's say we have harsh braking event number one, harsh braking event number two, where you're on, say, a major interstate. I'm in North Carolina, so I-95 goes north-south in North Carolina. And let's say we have a harsh braking event at exit number three. Event number one, free flow speeds are 65 miles per hour. We see no real issues with the roadway. That's an alarming harsh braking event. Harsh braking event number two, though, at a different time, we can look at our historic traffic, our historic speeds, and see that there actually was a traffic jam. And the harsh braking event was as it was approaching. Maybe the free flow speeds went from 65 miles an hour and quickly dropped off to, say, 15 miles an hour. So we would score number two as less risky behavior than event number one. So again, the whole concept of TomTom data is to provide context to all of these events that are being witnessed. And of course, the last piece that we support is fraud detection and claims validation. And going back to similar to the UBI, it's all about providing context to events. So, for instance, there's an accident at a specific intersection. TomTom can help you actually locate that claim event, put a point on the map, and then start evaluating what are the conditions around that event. Was there a road closure? Was there a lane closure? Was there icy conditions, or was there a weather condition around that time? What was the speed of traffic at that exact instance in time? What does the road network look like? Was the speed limit 35 miles an hour, or did the claim say that it was 45 miles an hour? We're going to have that information. We're going to have information again on the curvature of the roadway. So was it following a sharp curve, or was there a steep gradient associated with that? So again, TomTom data is providing a ton of context to validating these claims and start identifying fraudulent behavior. So again, with all three use cases, TomTom data is simply an input that helps derive actionable insight. So with TomTom, we can deliver our data in various different formats. So again, we have the core geospatial data. That's going to have all the information on signposts, all the road information, speed limits. We do have building information. We have geocoding information. We have address points, points of interest. We had one insurer that was looking at a UBI use case, and they wanted to know where are all the bars that these late night drivers are driving around. Are they spending a lot of times in bars and then driving, thereby having a potential DUI incident? So that's the core geospatial data. And then on top of that is where we start offering our rich traffic data that really provides the further insight. So we can provide information like what is the traffic volume on a road segment at a specific time? What are the speed profiles for that road? So what is typical? What do we expect for speeds? We do have live traffic. We don't see in the insurance space live traffic being extremely valuable, but it is there if needed. We have hazards information. So again, core TomTom offering is that traffic piece. And then we're able to deliver all of this data either in an API format, so you can call on an individual basis to pull information associated with a location, or we can deliver a batch file so that if you are building a territory risk model, you need that historic data to be able to build the core territories that you're looking at. So at the end of the day, TomTom's providing data to enhance the offerings of the insurance industry, and we can be very flexible in our delivery formats. So again, wanted to cover those three use cases specifically, and then bring in our partner Draivn, who you met Alex earlier, but Draivn's been a customer with TomTom for some time. They are leveraging our Orbis offering today to build their insurance model. So with that, Alex, it's all yours.
Yeah, Peter, thank you. And I'm actually very excited to build on what you just described and explore our lessons and firsthand experience where this powerful combination of telematics data and contextual data could unlock very pragmatic and tangible ROI, and how we could do this practically without going into rabbit hole of 5-year-long IT project. But before we go there, right, I think it's helpful to establish a little bit of the background why we should even bother talking about ROI today, right? Well, commercial auto has been challenging for more than a decade, with combined ratios stubbornly above 100. Then there was a sign of hope, obviously, back in COVID when nobody was effectively driving. And now the situation is back where it was and trending pretty much one direction. So from what we observed, there are generally two big group of factors which impact performance. One is obviously what we call macro environment, right? And that would mean social inflation, claims inflation, and obviously all these current litigation practices. And the other one would be, okay, we still have quite some data gaps in our underlying processes, which impact performance, obviously, all the way through, starting with initial risk assessment, ending up with claims. And a few examples of that would be like, okay, let's look at our vehicle schedules, right? They're not always super correct and not properly updated. We still use quite some proxies and self-reported factors in our submission, especially around geo exposure. And the evidence collection process when there is an accident, well, not always super elegant and might take quite some time. In that sense, the last year was not so different, right? 14 out of 20 insurers ended up with underwriting losses, despite double-digit price increases in some cases. And the notable exception is Progressive, right? Which is, I feel, the only insurer who consistently outperforms the market, and they use telematics and contextual data systematically. And, well, they claim that pretty broadly that this information is by far their best predictor at the moment. Now, to frame that differently, what's effectively going on, right? Progressive is cherry-picking the best risks, and then they leave the rest of the market compete for what remains. That means that if you are insurer who is still considering deploying that technology, well, we have bad news, because the pond where you are fishing becomes smaller, right? And it is not, for sure, not getting any better because it's adversely selected. Now, if we look at the telematics and contextual information as the source of the core data for our underlying processes, right, it becomes pretty obvious that could give us better answers, right? We could start with validating fleet inventory, right? How many vehicles are there and what types of them, how much they're driving, and importantly, where they drive, right? We could validate through home base, through radius of operation, exposure to different states or rate territories, and so on. And then for more sophisticated rating, obviously, we could start looking into driver behavior and overall safety practices of the organization. And then there are quite some benefits, obviously, in claims. Now, if we look at the, if we deploy that technology and end-to-end across all our core use cases, we're talking about around 20x ROI, which means for every dollar invested, we could get $20 in return. And the beauty is quite some of the benefits are available very early without huge IT investment or, any change in your workflows. And later today, I will dig deeper into each of those buckets. Now, the idea behind the Draivn, obviously, to make fleets data, which include telematics and context, useful for the insurance process and get industry back to profitability. We would envision that once insurer has impact on their P&L, they would for sure share back those benefits with insurers in the form of better rates, right, more streamlined services, and so on. And mechanically, from the transaction perspective, the way we do that, we take the data at the source, whatever source is, we ingest it with the consent, normalize, reconcile against different system of records, enrich with the context, and translate into the outputs which any participant of the insurance transaction could use in their processes. Now, on top of that data factory, we have a set of workflows which make using this data easy in the process, right? For example, we strongly advocate that telematics and contextual data shouldn't be treated any differently than any other submission information, right? And that means this information should be available in the underwriting process as early as possible. And we have tools to do that. Now, these challenging market dynamics and profitability issues, they created unusual consensus, to be honest. Now, almost all customers we talk to, they agree that telematics and context matter. Now the question is how we deploy it. Where do we start? We still hear those debates whether this capability should belong to loss control or underwriting. And I think it's not or, it's both, right? But sequence obviously matters. Historically, those capabilities, they started in loss control, right? Because it sounds natural because of all these safety discussions. But it also means that ROI could be delayed, right? Because in the first place, you need to establish the benchmark, which is ideally grounded in the loss history and loss experience to be even able to identify those fleets which need help. Then you need to build a program which helps those fleets to improve. And then you need time till those improvements get their way into P&L. I'm not saying that impossible, right? But I'm just saying it takes time. And that's why when you talk to multiple insurance executives, they might be a little bit skeptic, saying, you know what, I actually saw this movie before. It didn't work well enough, right? So what's different today? And I think that the more pragmatic answer is really to start with underwriting and start with foundations. That would mean let's get base exposure right in the first place. Let's really understand how many vehicles out there, right? And how much they drive. And then, and this is where contextual data is so powerful, we could really understand true geo exposure and get away of using any proxies in that equation, right? Because it gives us clear answer in terms of, okay, where's the home base for this very fleet? What's the operating radius? What's the distribution across states or state territories? We could drill down into exposure to top 10 cities or even road classes and so on. And the beauty is this approach doesn't require huge IT lift or change in the process and unlocks tangible benefits right there, right? Because they are coming, well, primarily through improved risk selection and reduced premium leakage, which is generally triggered by wrong vehicle count or radius misclassification. So these are just few examples what we generally observe, right? This is the example with one of the insurers who believe that they are insuring around 180 vehicles, right? When you connect to telematics, you see that, well, there are almost 40 vehicles showing up in addition to that. Same story when we start validating geo exposure, right? We see on this very picture that there is significant exposure outside home territory. And there is a study from Verisk when they estimated commercial auto insurance experienced, well, more than 15 billion in radius-related premium leakages over the past decade, which is quite a lot, actually. Now, well, let's imagine we mastered those foundations, right? Now we may start getting more sophisticated. And that means let's start really digging into behavior. And this is another leverage where contextual data improves our ROI, because adding contextual data significantly improves accident prediction, especially for top risk segments. And that means that insurer receive additional precision in terms of their risk selection and pricing, and then they could start using the same exact metrics in the data-driven portfolio management to understand the developments and loss control, right, to trigger very targeted interventions. In principle, that doesn't have to be sequential, right? But from what we hear, many insurers, they don't want to build their behavior model. Well, many of them will not have enough scale, right, to build compelling enough data set, which is reliable. So for that, there are third-party models out there, like Milliman, for example, which you could get out of the box. And now, if we look a little bit in the future, how the insurer of the future could look like, I believe this would be the company who builds their risk architecture on 3 core pillars. Obviously, one pillar is the power of loss runs, no questions about it. Another one is behavior insights, which are put in the short-term context. And then the third pillar would be overall power of the longer-term exposure. And to illustrate the example, let's take one best driver and put it in the middle of Manhattan, right? And let's take so-so-ish driver, right, and put it in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, right, in rural area. Now, if we compare the two, the driver in Manhattan will represent significantly higher risk in terms of accident frequency, right? But most likely that's going to be fender benders. However, the driver in rural area will be much more riskier in terms of potential severity. So that matters. And now let's wrap up with claims. All right. So I think this is another application where telematics paired with contextual data unlocks very tangible ROI and could be relevant across all process steps. Right. We could start with using that information as really part of the full telematics program, and really use that for monitoring and then creating and providing better footage in terms of in the case of an accident. That means, however, for that to make it work, you need to have telematics program in the first place, right? You need to enroll the fleet up front into monitoring program, and then you need to connect this process with your claims process. Now, said that, it's still not perfect. There are quite some false positives in that sense, and using telematics as a FNOL is, well, yet to be improved, I would say. However, there are other ways of thinking about that. We could use the same approach at the FNOL, right? If we already know that accident happened, we could trigger telematics and contextual lookup at that very moment and get very robust evidence of what actually happened at this very accident. And this evidence would include vehicle information, driver information about the trip and event, which are put into the right context, and video on top of that if it's available in the initial platform which fleet is using. So there is no ongoing commitments needed. It's just one-time transaction, right? You get the report done. You could think about modification of that process when you use telematics and contextual information in litigation, right? If you know that you need to get prepared, you need to put strategy in place and understand actually what happened, you could do the same exercise. You could look up telematics information in the discovery. You could get the same accident report, right? And in addition to that, you will get forensic evidence, obviously. Optionally, you could look up into longer-term history of this very motor carrier to understand, this very accident, is it really exception, right? Or we're dealing with the, nasty trend with the safety overall. So based on what we see and what our customers are telling us, using this data in claims is another improvement pillar, obviously, and the bulk of benefits are coming from multiple ways. So essentially, telematics and context could help us to triage and fast close, right? So essentially, using this data, we could understand severity of an accident. We could understand, okay, who is liable actually for all that, and then as Pete described, it could help us to detect fraud. It also helps us with the reserving, right? Because we get the very detailed information early in the process. And then it helps us to drive down litigation costs because we have better facts, and we can get them early in the process, which limits our exposure to potential nuclear settlements. Now, the beauty of using this information in claims is we consider that as really one of the lowest hanging fruits, to be honest, because it doesn't require insurer to build full-fledged telematics program. You could start using this information transactionally, right? As I described, if you know that accident happened, you could look it up, get one-time report, done. You don't need to commit for the full monitoring and convince the fleet to share the data for the full fleet up front and things like that. It's super easy, and you get tangible benefits at your fingertips, right? So let me pause here and open up the stage for Q&A.
Thanks, Peter and Alex, for that very insightful session. I think all our audience would be very appreciative of what you shared. I can see questions flowing in already. I need a few seconds to select the questions. Meanwhile, I'm going to play a short video for you. All right, let's get started with the Q&A. I'm going to pick the first question. This one is for Alex, I believe. Alex, the first question is, where do you see the biggest barriers to adoption for contextual data and models?
Thanks, Vinod. I think, there are a couple of them. I think the most obvious one, we just don't use that, technology and this data and capability in the process, right? So there is what do we often see, right? There is the data collection effort, which is going on, and then underwriting lives their own life, and, we are not cross-reference the information which we get in the submission with what we really receive from telematics and the context, right? As the result, there is no impact on P&L, right? And there is no adoption. Another more metaphysical piece would be, look, many initiatives around telematics, they start with very good intentions, but sometimes they lack, tangible objectives which are connected with the insurance outcome, right? If we look at the potential drivers of the insurer economics, this would be growth, losses, and expenses, right? So ideally, any telematics initiative is somehow pulling one of those levers or better few of them. While in reality, we still sometimes hear our telematics program helped us to reduce number of break-ins or speed-ins or increased engagement in driver coaching or things of that nature, which is obviously important, but that's a signal rather than the outcome, right? It's not necessarily connected with the P&L, and that means adoption might get stalled. And then for the fleet, which is participating in this process, right? If there is no benefit in the P&L for the insurer, then there is nothing shared back with the fleet, and then you lose the economic incentives to get through the whole thing. And then if you look at the short-term spikes and the behavior changes, if they are not nudged with the proper incentives, then they are decaying pretty quickly, right? So I think, well, short answer would be, we're not using this data in the process. We're not super clear in terms of our objectives and what we're aiming to accomplish. And then the result, there are sometimes not enough incentives in place to ecosystem participants to bother to do that.
I agree. I think from our perspective, we see the number one reason being the first thing that you mentioned, right, in terms of not using any of the contextual data. I think that was bang on. The next question is for Peter. So the question is, at City EU, we have been using a lot of TomTom data in various countries. How far can this concept be applied to countries outside USA? Is Draivn already operating in Europe? Probably it's the first part is for Peter and the second part is for Alex.
Right. So absolutely. TomTom's data from a traffic perspective is available in 84 countries. So we absolutely have coverage outside of the United States. Our core geospatial data that we discussed at the very beginning of the webinar is available globally. So in short, yeah, the concept can absolutely be applied outside of the United States. As a matter of fact, I believe telematics really got started in Europe and has caught on here lately in the United States. So yeah, absolutely expansion beyond the US. And I can let Alex speak to Draivn's European business.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Our primary market at the moment is US and Canada. To be honest, even though the technology as such is obviously agnostic in terms of geography, right? Essentially, what we do, we take the data in, process, and translate it at outputs, which I believe applicable more or less across different geographies. Said that, we don't have live deployments beyond the US and Canada at the moment. We would consider those thoroughly, given that we have a very small crew, right? And we need to be selective in terms of battles which we pick, but conceptually we can do that.
Thanks, Alex. So the next one is for Peter. So we collect a lot of telematics data, but the context around those events is limited. What's the simplest way to enrich our existing data with TomTom location information?
Sure. So first and foremost is taking that floating GPS data. It actually needs to be associated with the road network. So when telematics data is generated, it is initially just a floating GPS point that's got a lat long, and beyond that, you don't have a lot of context on the actual road network. So I think the first step is to associate those GPS points and the actual route to the road network that it was on. So you're going to get information again on the speed limits, road conditions, etc. So that's first and foremost, is just actually providing the context to where are these GPS points and what do they actually represent. And then as you get that, you can start adding in the traffic data, right? You can start looking at providing additional context with the historic traffic, just as we discussed throughout the webinar. So yeah, the core is getting that initial GPS point associated with the road network, and then piling on the traffic, the incidences, etc. after that.
I see a related question, Peter. Maybe you can club it. The question is, there was a mention of real-time traffic data volumes, how this information is generated, and is this based on probe vehicles?
Absolutely. So TomTom has multiple data sources that contribute to our traffic products. We are in I believe 1 in 4 vehicles on the road in Europe, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 vehicles in the United States. So that's through our OEM partners. And so that's one source of data. We also work with a lot of, believe it or not, telematics providers that are sharing data with us, and then we also white label TomTom applications as well. So we have multiple different ways that we capture that probe data, but absolutely, there's I think we're at about 600 million connected devices. So that's in vehicle probe data, that's through applications, white labeling, and through partners of ours that are actually providing that data.
Thanks, Peter. Next question is for Alex. So benefits for insurers is very clear in using contextual data and models. But what are the benefits for the brokers and fleets? I think the audience are curious to hear the other side of the story.
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, if you don't mind, probably before we go there, just quickly building on what Peter just described in terms of if you already have telematics information and you need to associate that with the with context, just let Draivn connect to your repository and we will do the rest, right? We will get the data in, enrich it, and give it back to you. So technically speaking, and then for the ecosystem. So conceptually, the way we think about that, obviously, our idea is to simplify the whole experience for all participants of the transaction, right, and make experience smoother, and then get it to overall profitability for everybody involved. In that sense, if we look at brokers, so our idea is to get them really into the position of risk advisors and less of the risk placers necessarily, right? So in that sense, practically speaking, they could use the same information and help the fleet in the first place to even understand, okay, where are the areas which we need to look at and what we need to improve, right? And then knowing which markets will perceive the fleet, using which lens, help the fleet to shape the strategy and approach that markets with the better narrative in that sense. So that would mean, very pragmatically, that would help brokers to sell more, right? Because they have value add service, and increase retention with their existing customers because they have value add service. And then for fleets, it's purely economical, I would say, because they're in a position when they invest quite heavily in the technology, right, in all the ELD devices, in cameras and what have you, and I think it's getting one direction. And I mean, their bill in terms of buying different technologies just getting bigger and bigger, and then having a way to get this data into the insurance process is one of the potential ways to get rewarded for all of these investments, right? Because if we can have compelling connection between these investments in safety and between the insurance outcome, ideally in the form of better renewal or smoother claim experience or things like that, then that's the benefit for the fleet to participate in that. So I think from where we see it at the moment, we see more and more insurers, encouraging participating in that, because they start considering that as really a way to increase their ROI in telematics rather than, Big Brother looking at me necessarily.
Thanks, Alex. The next one is a very interesting one for Peter. As insurers adopt AI models for claims automation specifically, how does TomTom help provide map and traffic context to these models so that they could validate claims more accurately? What's your view on this, Peter?
Absolutely. So, yes, AI is a big player and really helps with the automation process. TomTom is aware of that, and we actually have stood up an MCP server that takes all of our TomTom data so that we can collaborate with your AI environments. So that's absolutely the easiest way, but all of our APIs can be incorporated, and even our raw data can be incorporated into AI models. But MCP servers by far is the easiest route forward there.
Clear. Next one for Alex. So the question is, can the same data foundation be used for use cases beyond auto liability?
Yeah, I think absolutely right, and that obviously increases ROI on those deployments. We have quite some customers who are looking at it creatively, right, and they might start using real telematics information and overlay that across accident hotspots, right, which will give them more precise risk selection for the APD, for example. We have other customers who are looking at theft hotspots in the application for MTC products or inland marine, for example, right? Because the idea is if you know that you have quite some exposure into the areas where there is the huge amount of theft going on, then probably that makes difference for you in your decision making. So I think, and there are quite some other ways we see some creative minds thinking about how we tackle workers' compensation, having all this information at fingertips, and given that we have already collected it for auto liability programs, right? So I think short answer is absolutely. Long answer, yeah, it obviously depends on the content, on the context and where you are in your journey.
Thanks, Alex. The next one is for Peter. I think this has a different angle to it altogether. So we work with several internal platforms and data vendors. That is the norm as we see it in the insurtech space. The question is, how difficult is it to integrate TomTom data without having to rebuild a customer's full system? Can you pitch in on this, Peter?
Sure. So TomTom's data is pretty flexible to work with. We can deliver via multiple formats, whether it's a batch file for consumption. We can work with APIs for our traffic data. Again, we discussed briefly the MCP server, so that's multiple ways to actually work with TomTom's traffic data. And I think part of the Orbis geospatial data, one of the beauties of that is that it is compatible with both OSM, Overture, and GERS ID. So we have the ability from a geospatial perspective to work with multiple different formats and multiple different environments. So we can deliver batch data, we can deliver via API. We have our MCP server, and then our core geospatial data is compatible with OSM. It's compatible with Overture. So it's compatible with most of the mapping formats that are used today. So point of entry is pretty straightforward. At the end of the day, TomTom will work with you on incorporating our data in the best format that works for you.
Thanks, Peter. I want to make a call out. I still see many questions, but feel free to add more questions from any of you who might want to ask more questions. Let me pick the next one. This is again for Peter. How reliable is traffic incident and road context data when it comes to validating claims? I think going back to the claims use case again, or spotting inconsistencies in reported accidents. Peter, if you can weigh on that.
Sure. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about providing context to what is being seen. And not to sound like a broken record, but it's important to have that underlying geospatial data, right? So we have the information on lane level information on the roadway that they were actually on, information on if the incident occurred at a intersection, what happens at that intersection on a regular basis, and what was happening at the time of the incident. And then our historic incident feed does not capture every accident. Full disclosure, we cannot capture every accident, but we do a very good job of capturing as much as possible. And then we get things like road closures, construction, that all contribute to providing the context to what actually occurred. So because we have all of this contextual information, we can help validate what actually was occurring in a claim. So if a claim says, I was coming up on a traffic jam, right, and I got rear-ended. Well, we go back and look at the historic traffic data, and traffic was free flowing, there was no traffic jam, then that's providing additional context. So we don't have all of the answers, but we absolutely are providing additional context to help with that validation process. So it's just an extra validation layer on top of what is already being done.
Thanks, Peter. I see the next one for Alex. In partnering with organizations like TomTom and FreightUp, what tangible benefits have your customers seen from these integrations, Alex? If you can help us with that.
Yeah, look, I would assume we're talking about fleet up customers, right? So essentially fleets which are using fleet up technology. I think, well, the main benefit would be just enabling those fleets which are investing in fleet up technology to get the rewards, insurance rewards for these investments, right? Simply speaking. So if there is a fleet who buys fleet up devices and consistently uses this information to make their drivers better and stuff like that, then making this information available for the insurer early in the process increases the chances that we'll have a smoother renewal, simply speaking. And then if we have other type of devices installed in the vehicle, for example, like camera, right? Obviously, we could unlock claims use case and make everybody's life easier just to drive, accident information collection faster and ultimately settle claims faster for everybody involved. So that means for the fleet getting back to the business earlier, right? So I think that these are just a couple of them, and then okay, let me pause here.
Clear. So we are towards the end of the session. I'll take one additional question. I think this is a question for both of you. Right? The question is, can the audience meet you at TRB 26? Right, Alex, will you be there?
I need to Google in the first place. What's that? Right, and then I will respond.
Okay. All right.
From a TomTom perspective, I'm not sure if I personally will be there, but I know TomTom is looking at TRB. We've attended in the past. So my expectation is that somebody from TomTom will be there. I'm not 100% sure whether it is going to be me or someone else, but it's absolutely on our radar.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Alex and Peter, for great, insightful presentations. I must also thank the audience for all the great questions. Super helpful. So if your question has not been addressed, we'll get back to you through an email to follow up on those questions so that they get answered. Thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone. It's me, Vinod, signing off from beautiful, rainy evening from Amsterdam. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.